Hi everyone, we're here with this week's question, today's question for 30 Days of UX Live. And today's question actually comes from Darren, and Darren wants to know, are there any common traps to watch out for when using quantitative data and statistics? And yes, there are definitely a ton of traps to watch out for. I'm going to run through a couple of traps that are common to statistics and then some traps that are just common to humans. And so some of the most common traps that you can find in statistics is, well, one of the first ones is only having one source of data. So, it's really hard sometimes in analytics to get more than one source of data. And so a lot of us might be using Google Analytics almost exclusively to get all our data. I would encourage you to go out and find other places to get data so you have more of a range and a comparison for the data results that you're getting. You can talk to customer service folks, or you can use another analytics tool like Hotjar or Kissmetrics to sort of back up and validate the data that you're getting from Google Analytics. Another thing that you might run into when you're working with quantitative data is setting an arbitrary cutoff for what data points are outliers or not. And I would encourage you, if you don't have any familiarity with how to figure out which data is outliers, to either speak to someone who does or do a little bit of research, or you can even sign up for my course to learn how to calculate statistical significance and sort of figuring out what's the variation and what should be an outlier and what's within the bounds of what would be normal in terms of distribution of your data. This way, you don't accidentally include something that should be an exception, thus skewing your numbers, or you don't accidentally exclude some things that would be normally a part of it, thus inflating your numbers. And so you want to make sure that when you're working with data, you're really being scientific and methodical about how you interpret the data and what stuff you include and exclude, and rather than just making a judgment call. And the last thing I want to talk about in terms of traps when working with quantitative data is, is to believe that the data is unbiased and objective. Data isn't. Data is just numbers, and the numbers come from what we observe in our everyday life. And really what the numbers are representations of different actions or decisions or points that we've made. And since we're humans and since we're biased, that means the numbers that we're getting are biased. If you think about an example where I'm using zip codes to tell which students, or to predict which students are more likely to go to Ivy League schools, well, that's pretty biased information because of where low-income populations are and who that represents in terms of race and that sort of thing. And so when you have that data and you use that to make predictions about the future, you're reinforcing the status quo and doing it behind the objectivity of numbers. Yes, those numbers do represent what happened in the past, and that can be said to be objective and that it has happened and therefore is irrefutable. But when you're using that to make decisions about the future, that's where it starts to bias you. And it's just as biased as any qualitative data that you're out there and that you're collecting. And so if you're not accounting for that when you're working with your data, and you're not accounting for that when you're using the data to make decisions, then you're reinforcing the biases that you're already working in. And I think that's a common trap that a lot of us fall into, where we think that because it's numbers, it somehow means it's objective. But it's not. You have to spend time figuring out the bias that's built into what happened in the past. So sort of like the way we talk about numbers from the past in terms of prices, and we control for inflation. You have to control for racism. You have to control for sexism. So in an unbiased society, those numbers would look very different than they do from our society in the past. And that's the type of thing that I don't think we often think about when we think about data and quantitative data especially. So those are my thoughts on traps that you might fall into when you're looking at statistics and numbers. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer, submit it in the box below, or email me at hello@pixelsforhumans.com, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Bye.